20 meters of scorched hangar deck separated her from 6 armored guns, and she was closing it on foot, unhurried, a training baton clipped dead weight at her belt. Valor watched from behind a shattered support column, throat too tight to shout the order a second time. 11 of the 12 promised minutes were already gone, burned up in smoke and screaming, and a body count nobody had tallied yet. The small alien had walked into worse odds than this twice already that week. Now she was doing it a third time, and this time there was no mat, no medic standing by, only live rounds aimed at real flesh, and Valor's own voice already hoarse from ordering her back. It hadn't started here. It had started 6 weeks earlier, on an observation deck that smelled of ambition and bad judgment, when 300 cadets from the galaxy's most decorated war species had turned to stare at the smallest one among them. She barely cleared 5.5 feet. Her uniform hung loose at the shoulders, and her file said Earth, a rock that had joined the Federation 90 days prior, and alone among hundreds of applicant worlds, had sent exactly one candidate. Kelvin the Throg leaned toward his neighbor and murmured something about bones made of dinner-table minerals. Laughter rippled down the ranks. Valor let it happen. It would be corrected soon enough, and quick corrections stuck better than lectures. The first correction came in the sparring ring against Prin, a Sil cadet with 6 limbs and 40 pounds on her. Prin promised to go easy. Mira Coast said nothing, only set her feet in a stance that looked, by every rule Valor had ever taught, wrong, too narrow, too upright, hands loose near her jaw instead of guarding her ribs. Prin's opening flurry found nothing but air. Then the human rose out of a crouch that shouldn't have generated force and put her fist into Prin's stomach with a sound like a mallet on wet clay. 4.7 seconds, start to finish. The arena went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with respect. Valor pulled her file that night. Earth was rated a Class 12 world, 3 grades past the harshest environment Valor's own people called home. Its history ran 5,000 years of humans refining the craft of stopping other humans, dozens of disciplines distilled from war after war after war, and this cadet held certification in 12 of them. Not their prodigy, their minimum. The Academy tested that theory the next morning, throwing her against Throck, an 800-pound Corvox who hadn't lost a match in 4 years. He pulled his first punch to something survivable, and it still would have broken a jaw. It never landed. She rotated her skull half an inch and stepped inside his reach, and a heartbeat, later 300 pounds of engineered soldier, hit the deck hard enough to crack the composite. Dust rolled outward in a ring. Throck raised his hand in surrender before Valor could call the match. "How did you do that?" Throck asked, still sitting in the dust, all 4 eyes wide. "Size loses to angle," she said. "Strength loses to leverage. My grandmother's rule, she's 73, and still puts me on my back once a month." By week's end, Throck was her student. So were 50 others. Command took notice. Admiral Thraxus ordered daily reports, and more pointedly, ordered Valor to make certain the human graduated happy. "The last thing we need," he'd said, "is that world deciding we're the threat." Then the sirens. 5 Ravager-class raiders, orbital defenses sabotaged from within. This had been planned, not stumbled into. 200 raiders hit the hangar under a leader named Brutus, 6 million credits on his head, and a reputation for collecting more. Valor split 300 half-drained cadets into a line that was never going to hold 12 minutes, let alone the 40 needed for reinforcements. Weapons crates were pried open and handed out 2 at a time. Instructors who hadn't fired anything but training rounds in a decade found themselves loading live charges with shaking hands. Mira checked her rifle with the same flat calm she'd shown in the sparring ring, then knelt to help a Sil cadet named Ren seat his magazine properly. "Ever shot anyone before?" Ren asked, his voice cracking. "No," she admitted, "but people have shot at me plenty. Same rules. Aim, breathe, don't die." Squad 7 took the worst of it early, pinned behind failing barricades. Then Mira rolled out of cover and dropped 3 raiders with 3 shots before their bodies hit the floor, and kept moving, drawing 5 more into a maintenance corridor alone. Only 4 came out, carried, not walking. The fighting spread through the hangar in ugly, close pockets. Cadets and raiders trading fire between crates and downloaders. And for a long stretch, it looked like sheer numbers would grind the line down regardless of what one small human could do in a corridor. Which brought the fight to Brutus himself, and to the 20 meters Valor had been watching her cross since the beginning of this telling. Federation scraps, Brutus called, plasma cannon braced against one armored shoulder. Kneel now, and it's quick. Make me work, and it's a lesson. One offer first, she said, stopping just inside his reach. Ships up, guns down, nobody else bleeds tonight. His guards laughed. She didn't wait for them to finish. In under 30 seconds, 6 armored veterans were down, knees folded backward, a neck turned past its stop, one man's own blade planted through his own boot before his suit locked and cooked him inside it. Brutus opened up with the cannon, and she ran the column line instead of the straight one, never where the beam had just been, until, impossibly, she ran straight at him. He tracked her, fired point blank, and she left the ground instead of the floor, higher than anything her size had a right to reach, and came down with her full weight on the cannon's housing. Baton punched through the cooling vent. It went off in his hands and threw him 10 meters into a supply rack. He was still trying to rise when she planted a boot on his chest and pressed the baton flat against his throat. "Stay down," she said, "or I make it a longer conversation." He stayed down. Behind him, 180 raiders who'd watched their leader put on the floor by something a third his mass threw their weapons down without being asked twice. Federation reinforcements arrived 37 minutes later, in time to help process prisoners and count the damage. General Horvath came down from the flagship himself, expression grim, and asked for a report. Valor gave him the numbers: 200 raiders, an academy that would need a week of repairs, a warlord bound for trial. When Horvath asked who'd taken Brutus down and heard it was a first-year cadet from Earth, his eyebrows climbed and stayed there through the entire replay of the footage. "How many did that world send us this cycle?" he finally asked. "One, sir." Valor found her afterward in the medical bay, forearm splinted, a burn dressing at her collarbone, otherwise unmarked. The room was too quiet for what had just happened: one medic's tray of instruments, the hiss of a coolant line, nothing else. "I told you not to do anything heroic," Valor said. "You said stupidly heroic, sir. I made a judgment call." A small, tired smile. "Does this mean I passed?" Valor didn't laugh. The moment didn't want it. "You did more than pass. You stood between 200 armed strangers and everyone behind you, and you didn't flinch. Do you understand how rare that is?" She was quiet a moment, turning her splintered wrist over like she was checking it still worked. "My grandfather fought in something called the Border Wars, never came home from his last posting. There's a medal in a drawer at my mother's house instead of him. He used to tell me evil only wins the innings where good people decide to sit it out." Her voice didn't shake. "I didn't feel like sitting." Valor said nothing for a while. There wasn't a reply that wouldn't have cheapened it. The story outran the official report within hours, growing new details with every retelling that Valor stopped bothering to correct. Earth's ambassador, asked about the cadet who'd broken a warlord and a champion in the same month, called her fine, but not exceptional. There are millions like her back home. The statement did more damage to Federation nerves than the raid had. Within a season, 17 species had requested human combat instructors, and applications from cadets wanting to train under Earth's methods numbered in the thousands. The Council voted Earth full membership in a fraction of the years such votes usually took. Mira graduated at the top of a class that had once laughed at her and shipped out to a counter-piracy unit that within a year posted the fleet's best record. Valor kept one thing from that final week, tucked in a desk drawer next to older commendations: her training baton, the housing dented on one end, the button worn smooth where a thumb had pressed it 100 times before ever needing to press it for real. Every cadet who asked about it got the same answer. It wasn't the weapon that mattered. It was who'd been willing to close the distance holding it.